Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's forum. We will be talking with you tonight with some great experts from around the table at SDSU, both student and staff, about housing and residential life and some of the things that we can expect or anticipate when you arrive this fall. Feel free to use the chat function throughout the entire experience. Also, it's up to you if you want to be on screen or off. I love to see your faces, so if you want to pop in now and again, that's fine too. My name is Jennifer Novotny. I'm the Senior Director here at the Student Union, a place that I think very soon will become part of your extended home here at SDSU. And I will have our panelists introduce themselves in a moment, as well as our student folks who are going to be working with us throughout the whole forum tonight to ask some questions of some of the experts on our panel. In addition, we have some phenomenal Zoom correspondents behind the scenes. Nathaniel Candelli and Danny Gissing will both be working behind the scenes to make sure all of those questions that are coming through the chat function get answered. As well as we have a fabulous staff member in the background going to populate some information on links and things like that in that chat function as well. So please refer to that throughout, and we're going to get things started. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to our panelists. We'll start with Becky Peterson.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Becky Peterson, and I'm the Director of Housing and Residential Life here at South Dakota State University. And my role is to provide oversight to the housing system, as well as assist in the facilities oversight of our residence halls and apartment communities. And I'd like to turn it over to Toby.
Good evening. I'm Toby Euchre. I am also in our Office of Housing and Residential Life. I am our Associate Director for Living, Learning, and Outreach. So that means if you are connected to one of our living learning communities on campus, I get to work with those partners across the board. And then I also get to do a lot of our partnership outward to communicate with new students, incoming students, new student orientation, all that jazz. I'm also a 2004 SDSU alumnus, so I'm a deeply held jackrabbit, and I'm excited to be back serving my alma mater and my campus community in this way, in this new role.
Hattie.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you could join us today. My name is Hattie, and I'm a senior majoring in political science, Spanish, and global studies. I'm also very active with Students Association, which is kind of like student government at SDSU. And then I'm also a third-year CA, or community assistant, and I work in Caldwell Hall. And I'll pass it over to Zev.
Hello, I am Zev Johnson. I will be a junior this year, another political science major. I will be a community assistant for my first year in Honors Hall, and I'm also heavily involved in Students Association on campus, as well as working with the admissions department. And that's it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So all of the faces that have just been introduced are people that you might interact with a lot, actually, when you come to campus very soon. And so this conversation and this relationship starts now, and we're going to have another forum after this, and I'll make sure that I give that a plug before we finish tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our students who have been thinking and considering questions that might be helpful in this forum.
All right, so one of the first questions that I have is for Becky Peterson, and it is, what sort of changes have you made for the fall?
Thanks, Hattie. So some of the changes we have made for the fall in our residence halls include working towards de-densification of the halls. So what this means is reducing the number of students who are living in our residence halls. In particular, our traditional 2 people to a room residence halls that have community bathrooms. So we have allowed for more singles in those spaces, and then work to assign less students to those rooms. So buildings that typically would hold close to 500 students are now holding significantly less. We have also worked to create guidelines for the community spaces, such as maximum occupancy in our kitchens, occupancy limits in our study spaces and our lounge areas, in order to enhance social distancing and allow for students to still utilize that space, but to do so in a safer manner. We've also worked at our front desk areas. You'll see when you come in, when interacting with student staff working the front desk, you'll see plexiglass barriers, and have made those changes there. We're also working to create some opportunities for students to interact and learn more about COVID-19. So our floor meetings will look a little bit different at the beginning of the year in terms of education as it relates to COVID-19. And we'll also have some supplies for students at the front desk, such as disinfectant. If they bring their own spray bottle, we're happy to share that so students can use that to keep their spaces clean. So those are some of the big changes that we've made so far in the residence halls.
Well,
Thanks, Becky. Sorry about that. I'm still learning, so this is a learning environment. You're welcome. Zeb, take it away.
Yes, next, Toby. What should students and families do to be best prepared? And is there anything special I should pack?
Sure. So I think that, as sort of the question implies, everybody plays a role in our process of making sure we have healthy, safe communities when students are back on campus with us. And so our side of that is a lot of the things that Becky was talking about in terms of some of the changes, but there are also pieces from families and students themselves. And I think one of the first big pieces is to have some conversations about what fall semester will look like based on your own sort of values and how important all of these different responses to our pandemic are to you and to your family. I think having a conversation about what does sort of the time away from home look like. You know, I think a lot of students might start with a particular idea of how often they were going to go home and spend time with their families as a part of their first semester in college. Some of those conversations might look a little different when we're thinking about preventing the spread and when we're thinking about keeping good, safe social distance, and when we're thinking about the fact that a lot of the maybe long weekends that are things we think of as times to be home look a little different with the new calendar for students. And so I think one of the key things for families to talk about is that conversation around how often do I come home? What are the parameters under which I might choose to do that? Do I just stay on campus for that time? Those are all things to try and navigate within that family to make decisions that are good for you and that are good for our community back on campus as well. I think other things to be prepared is to think about what are the things that you're doing at home that are helping with your health and how can you replicate them on campus. So I always talk about that in lots of new student orientation settings. Think about what makes your home comfortable to you and how can you replicate that in your own home at SDSU. And sometimes that looks like, what do you bring? What item do you hang on the wall? I think right now it also includes how do you keep that space clean, tidy, safe, disinfected. So like Becky mentioned, I think one of the things to bring would be to find an empty spray bottle or some other sort of item that we could fill with the disinfectant and help you out in that way, but have your own. I also think giving thought to the type of hand sanitizer or cleaning materials, those sorts of things that you bring to campus would be a really great way to be thoughtful about your role and your sort of approach to being in community with others.
All right, for our next question, how do I talk with the people I'm living with about our expectations for maintaining safety and comfort?
Sure. Thanks, Hattie. Hey, can I actually go back to your first question? Because I forgot to share something. So one of the really big things, I apologize for that we are doing in the halls is we are cleaning high touch surfaces more frequently. So we've added in some additional staff and employees to assist us with that cleaning process. So we are doing more frequent cleanings. But to get to the question you actually asked, which is, how do I have that conversation and engage in that, talking about my living environment and those expectations? So the first step for me is always getting to know your roommate. So if you have a roommate or roommates, building a relationship with them. And this is a relationship that you will develop from day one, and one this year, out of necessity, will need to be built pretty quickly and pretty openly and honestly to discuss things that you are comfortable with, talking about guests and who can come in and out of that space, talking about cleaning and how often we're going to clean and what does cleaning look like and who is responsible. And then really just engaging and being transparent about what you need as a resident. And if there is, an incongruence there, that's where our wonderful student staff come in and can really help guide that conversation. One of the other pieces you'll get after you move in is a roommate agreement form. So this roommate agreement form is essentially a guide to a conversation, and you and your roommate or roommates will work through that and answer specific questions, again, about guests, about noise, about study habits and sleep habits, to really help build along that conversation and help you be successful in that. And so that document is particularly useful if there is a disagreement and we need to reference it or come back to it. But really spending some time investing in building a positive relationship, sharing what you need, hearing what the other person needs, and then moving forward.
That's helpful to know that that is out there and that exists, because it might get that conversation started for those who aren't maybe as comfortable with having those conversations. So great to hear that.
So I've got the next question, and that is, what are some ways in which I can meet other students?
Sure. So I think there are obviously some differences to the way that those interactions happen when we're working to achieve really good social distancing. But at this point, our plans on campus, and you probably heard a little bit about it if you tuned in last week for the conversation, are that there will be some face-to-face courses, some small group gatherings that are done with sort of appropriate parameters. And so there will still be those opportunities to see face-to-face some of the individuals that you'll be going to class with and spending time. I think another way to have those individual connections is, like Becky mentioned, to have a really good developed conversation and relationship with your roommate. That'll be a really good ally in some of those things. And I think through roommates, some smaller networks of connections can be built, even if those connections aren't face-to-face. You know, if your roommate has a group of friends back home or a group of friends on campus, that's their kind of go-to crew. I think there are ways in your space to be inclusive of each other into some of those interactions. I also think that our CAs, our community assistants, and Hattie's one of them, is another group that can connect you to some of the other people that are there and that are part of that community. Our CAs will be well trained in what are some of the ways to develop good relationships within that floor community or within that small group of people that are in keeping with our expectations around social distance and safety. And so they'll be really good resources for helping maybe connect smaller groups together. So you'll be around people in your residential community, and I think that keeping in mind the health and safety, but also keeping in mind that these people are nearby and are going through some of the same challenges you are, has that shared experience that can really build good relationships, whether those relationships are built sitting next to each other on a futon, or maybe more this year are built across some screens, across some lounge spaces, outdoors, some of those other spaces.
Becky, is there alternative housing available if a student becomes sick?
Thanks, Hattie. Yes. So if a student becomes diagnosed with COVID-19 or suspects that they may have COVID-19, there is housing that we refer to as quarantine and isolation housing, or QIH for short. And you know that the link to our plan was put into the chat, so I'd encourage you all to look at that as well. That space is set up for students who may need to isolate or be quarantined based upon a diagnosis or a suspicion that they've been exposed. Some of that space is located over in the Wakota Annex and is set up in such that students will either take their belongings or we will gather them for them. They will go and spend time in that space until they are well or can have a negative test result and be permitted to rejoin back in the other residence halls, but really a space where they can continue their academics away from their room. And so yes, there is plenty, there's space available, and we encourage students to utilize that space if it is needed.
So I guess next, it's what's my role as a student in helping to keep myself and others safe?
Sure. First, my role is to correct things and make sure that I give credit where it's due. I'm still thinking in terms of a previous version of staff, and so I've gotten to work with Hattie in some settings already. Zeb, of course, is also one of our staff members, and so my apologies for skipping that reference a little bit earlier. I don't always keep all of those details together in my brain. But in terms of the ways that I think we can all, again, be working together towards each other's health and safety, I think that our students need to pay attention to what's being asked of them by the university with a lot of these plans that are out there and with a lot of the communication that the university is sharing around its Jacks Are Back plans and around just its general approach to avoiding the spread of COVID-19. So I think even more than usual, one of the best roles a student can play in their own safety and the safety of our community is to be paying attention to the information that they see and that is sent to them on a regular basis. So, you know, we say all the time to pay attention to that Jacks email, but I think really this particular year, paying attention to the Jacks email and watching for important and updated information is not just a nice thing to do, but really is the way for us to be the most responsible community members that we can be. And so I think that's first and foremost. Pay attention to the information that's out there, be someone who is looking for that information, and then be someone who's heeding it when it does come. So our university leaders go through a lot of consideration and deliberation and thought in the things that they ask of our students, our faculty, and our staff. And so when that has happened and an ask goes out, whether that's about converting a course to a new format so that it can be delivered in a remote setting rather than face-to-face, whether that request is to wear a face covering in our public spaces, whether that request is to do something else that we can't even predict at this moment. I think paying attention and then observing what's being asked of us as community members is really, really important. We will all have a chance to have a voice and to be involved in the way that we live together on our campus, but we also have to work from the same rule book and the same playbook. And I think the university is working to create that for us. And so our responsibility, me as a staff member and you as a student, is to be cognizant of all those things.
And I just want to interject that I am so glad that Toby mentioned the Jacks account, because I think that's something from a high school perspective. You probably have been using a different email. You might even have more than one. I've learned from a few new students coming this fall that they have up to 4 email addresses, which would be way more than I could handle. But I think now is a great time to start calibrating that Jacks email account will be a great place to gain information and also receive updates. And I would also throw in a plug for, if you can't find it there, and if you can't necessarily find it in your inbox, there are great people throughout the halls that can help answer those questions throughout any day, as well as not just somebody that you're living with, but maybe a CA that lives on the floor. They might have quick access to that information as well. So I'll turn it back to you, Hattie.
All right, Becky, could you please tell us a little bit about what changes are happening this year?
Yeah, you bet. So some of the changes with dining, if you are a returning student, you will go into the University Student Union and Larson Commons and notice that it looks a little bit different than how you remember it. If you are a new student, this is exactly how it should be for you, so it won't look any different. There are guided stanchions, and you will see wayfinding for where you should go in terms of to queue up to get either your lunch and to get your food. We ask that you observe the social distancing that is spaced out in those lines and follow the cues in terms of entrance and exit. Heidi, who is our Director of Campus Dining, is also on this call, and she's happy to answer questions in the chat as well. But some of the other things are a reduced menu initially as we return to campus. We want to make sure that you are served quickly and accurately and have a really positive experience with their dining program. And so you may see a little bit of a smaller menu, and keep in mind some of the national brands are also guiding this as well. But we just want you to have a really great experience with our dining. There is reduced seating in the areas, but then you'll also see expanded seating in other areas. So the union has opened up a lot of different spaces for students to enjoy their meals within the building. The other piece in Larson Commons, there are some changes there in terms of seating and what is going to be available and how food will be served. And so those are some of the major changes that'll be happening with dining.
Yes, our next question relates to move-in. And that is that last year, people in blue shirts carried my stuff into my room. And how will move-in look this year?
Sure. Move-in is my very favorite time of year. That's one of the things that's a big part of my role in my associate director job, is helping coordinate with a great big team of folks our Meet State move-in process. And as Zeb can imagine, and as the question I think assumes, there are lots of things about that that will look different this year, but it's still going to be really, really exciting for our students and for our team that'll be helping out. So in terms of the move-in process, I imagine that several folks on this call have probably even already taken advantage of one of our phases of move-in, and that's our drop and go process. That's something that we have done in small scale for a number of years, but that really seemed like a great way to help spread out the process of moving people in this particular year as we were considering some pretty major changes. So drop and go is an opportunity where a student has an hour to come to campus and kind of bring all the big things in and get them moved in. We've been doing drop and go for a little bit less than a week right now. And so we've moved in a lot of students' stuff, or they've moved their stuff into rooms. And so that's a step that we have out there from now through the 7th of August, so a week from Friday, that will allow over 1,000 of our residents to have kind of an early process of getting moved in and getting some of those biggest belongings in, so they're not all trying to haul a futon up the same set of stairs in Brown Hall when they come in the fall. So that's one of our approaches that's been really different and that we think has been really successful for the way that that will work. After we get through that drop and go process, we've worked to use a phase process to our move-in. And so you've hopefully seen that in your JAX email as well, that our returning students are coming back to join us sort of that August 10th through 13th timeframe, especially if they have a reason to be back on campus. Think about our Pride of the Dakotas marching band, or our student leaders, our student athletes. All of them are coming back sort of early in that August week. And then all of our new students we're encouraging to join us August 14 through 16. And so you should have an email in your JAX account that has a building specific link and login so that you can have a time that's really designed for you. That's another one of the changes that we've made this year to move in, is that previous years we've tended to just do a sort of phased process that gives you a time based on your floor, but then really lets it be kind of a free-for-all from there. And so we're moving almost 2,000 students in one day in a traditional Meet State process. And so that's why those blue shirted muscle people hauling all of your belongings has been part of the process. This year, having that spread out across 3 days will really help us limit the number of people that are in at any given moment, and also means that we were able to do specifically assigned times. And so paying attention to those will be really important. Another big change in that process is that because we know that one of the simplest ways to minimize the contact with other people's stuff and with the germs that might go along with that is to not be sharing sort of touched spaces with other people unless you really have to. We've chosen that one of our best ways to keep our team and our students safe is to not have people hauling belongings up and into the buildings. And so that will look a lot different for our students that are moving in, but that's why we've tried to really spread out that stuff so that it should still move really smoothly for you as you move in. We will still be using, for some of our locations, the golf cart sort of hauling that is part of our Meet State tradition as well. And so lots of our buildings, by having shorter distances to travel, because we're using fewer people moving into the building at any given moment, that means a lot of our buildings you can get really close in a way that you hadn't in previous Meet State operations. And so that'll help not need that extra muscle quite as much. But those spaces where there still is a big distance between the building and where you'll kind of start out, we will use some help to haul those things back and forth. So you'll see some of those things. I think where you're more likely to see our volunteers in this year's move-in process is in helping direct people around campus and in helping provide that visible welcome. So expect to see people in their Jackrabbit blue and probably a Meet State pin welcoming you to campus and saying, hey, this is a main entrance, we're really glad you're here, and then being able to use signs and some sort of communication to help you know where to go. So that'll be a real focus for us with our volunteers this year. And we still plan to have a big cadre of volunteers there to make that day or those days really, really exciting. But because we're not in that one-day move-in process, it changes a little bit some of those logistics. So hopefully that gives you a little sense of what move-in will look like. The remaining returning students will move in then on the 17th and 18th, those last 2 days before classes start. And on those days, we'll spend time doing some of the important transition programming for first-year students. That's always a part of Meet State. So Convocation, Thump Start are traditional events that help our students really get to know our campus. And those events will still happen, again, in some changed ways that will connect with our current era. So we'll be doing it in smaller groups. We'll work to have you attend those events with people you're already interacting with through your residence hall or through your academic courses. So trying to do some of those things, but still making sure that that welcome and that sense of home and that sense of being part of the Jackrabbit family is what Meet State and what Move In is all about. And that won't change no matter what the logistics are.
Well, Toby just mentioned it, but one of the best parts about being at State is all the events that we get to participate in. And so, Becky, I was wondering, can you please tell us a little bit more about what programming might look like?
Yeah. So programming, for those of you that are new, is what we call events that happen in the hall. These are social and educational events really designed around helping students build connections to one another, to their community, and getting to know a little bit about a specific topic or idea. Our programs are incredibly popular with our residents and a really great way for people just to get to know others in their residence hall. So this fall, because of COVID-19, programming is going to look different. It will not necessarily be 50 people in a residence hall basement having a ping pong tournament or doing a video game tournament or something like that. We will be following the university events and programming protocol that exists on the Jacks Are Back plan. And so programming is going to be some virtual programming. It is going to be pairing and partnering with our campus activities partners across campus and working together to have some really high quality programs for our students. But it won't necessarily be, toast at the front desk on Tuesdays as people are coming in and out of the building. I also anticipate that programming is going to be some passive programming as well. So that is typically done through either our bulletin boards or creative ways that the CAs have of sharing additional information with our residents about specific topics. So programming is definitely still going to occur, and we're going to find new and creative ways to connect our communities together in the halls. It's just going to look a little bit different and socially distanced this year. And I promise you we're all going to have a long, beautiful fall, so that way we can have lots of programming and events outside.
I think that's actually stuff that you'll see, and I'll jump in a little with some of the programming that I know we've been working on for our Meet State phase. I think you'll see some examples in that very first weekend of the approaches that we'll take to programming that will last throughout the whole semester. And so I think seeing some of our campus engagement programming go virtual, so our student engagement expo which is an opportunity for folks to learn about all the varied student organizations that are out there, is something that will take a virtual format that I think you'll find really engaging and fun and still have an opportunity to connect with a lot of things. I think you'll see some programming from our wellness center, our fit and rec team. That's outdoor programming, some yard game tournaments and things like that, that I think will be representative of some of that outdoor time that Becky was talking about. And then I think you'll see lots of small scale virtual, passive, and small group programming from your community assistants that, again, you'll see it right away in that first weekend, and that'll be pretty representative of the ways that we'll approach programming throughout the semester.
Kind of bouncing off that, on the area of hanging out with other students and social atmospheres, how will I hang out with my friends or get together to study with my classmates in hall lounges this year?
For sure. I think that one of the ways that that will look different but still be there is just being thoughtful and cognizant of the space limitations and of the occupancy limits that will be posted for every space that we have that's a common space. And so you'll want to look for those as you enter your building and get a sense of, okay, in this lounge, it's this number of people. Our laundry rooms will typically have one person at a time. Thankfully, that's made easier by the fact that a lot of our laundry facilities are connected to online system to look and see what's available. So I think that'll help you out. Our lounges will have furniture removed from them to help give a visual representation of what that full sort of occupancy will be. So again, I think it's one of those things that may not look the stereotypical way of what you might think of with college, where you've got sort of the like Friends couch from the TV show, right? Where they're all piled on there and kind of leaning all over each other. That probably won't be the way that Hangouts will happen in our halls, or hopefully won't be. But there will still be opportunities to, have those really important conversations, maybe just across the room from each other and in recognition of the space that we have to keep. I do think that one of the really great opportunities that is there within the halls is those study spaces that you referenced, Zeb. And I think those will still be really good areas to have the interpersonal connections that might be necessary, especially for a group project. We aren't going to have group projects in class go away because we have a pandemic to respond to. And so I think maybe in a world where it used to be that your whole group would get together, 6 or 7 people around a coffee table or around a table somewhere else, I think it might be that 2 or 3 of you can work on a part of that project in a study room in your living space and in the halls. So it's just about being a little bit more creative along some of those ways, but there will still be lots of ways to interact with people. I think that outdoors is also one of the things that I would really lean on. I think about the opportunities I've had to be out and around in our community, in parks or at the Dakota Nature Park or on campus at some of our big green spaces. And I think a lot of the information out there tells us that the moving air and the distance that we can keep and the fact that it's not enclosed in the same way make a lot of those interactions a lot lower risk than some of the things that might be large groups of people in small areas. And so I would encourage folks that are really looking for that social interaction to think about the ways that they can duplicate that in an outdoor setting or in a bigger setting rather than just on their floor.
Thank you, Toby. My next question for Becky is, do I have to wear my mask in my residence?
Yeah, you do not have to wear your mask or a mask in your individual residence hall room. Campus is issuing some guidance here soon regarding the mask requirement and what it looks like for SDSU in relationship to the Board of Regents masking policy that was released last week. So as Jennifer and Toby mentioned, check the JAX Are Back page as well as check your JAX email, because the most up-to-date and current information will be released there. So any additional guidance or specifications about other areas in the residence halls will come through that information.
Awesome. Next question is, what's the policy of having a guest or friend or parent in my room?
Yeah, so guest policy. So this year and this fall, starting out, the guest policy is going to be you plus one other person who is a registered SDSU student. So guests need to be an SDSU student. They need to be enrolled with a maximum of 4 people in any residence hall room. So that guest policy really is keeping our campus community tight-knit and together. As I mentioned at the beginning, thinking about who is allowed in your space, how you want to navigate that with your roommate or roommates, like that's going to be really important here. We want students to make thoughtful decisions when it comes to their health and safety. And if that means not having guests for a while or only socializing with guests outside, that's okay. You will still have the opportunity to build positive and strong lasting friendships, regardless of what the guest policy looks like. So we encourage people to think critically about the guests in their spaces. So it is registered SDSU students and you plus one.
All right. And so then one last question I have is, who can I go to for help, guidance, and advice? Will they be trained on COVID protocols?
That's a great question. I think that's one of the things I actually really love about SDSU, and it was something I loved as a student and something that I continue to really come back to as a staff member and as a member of this community, is that I think the answer to the question, who can I turn to, who can help me, is really everybody around you on campus is, I think, designed and ready to be a part of helping you navigate your fall semester. And so I think that could look like knowing who to refer you to for a really specific question, because no one of us knows every single answer about every facet of the university. But we're really committed to making sure that we can connect you with who that person is. But I think it can also mean having, as the question assumes, some really well-trained peer leaders, and I think full-time faculty and staff that are really clued into what's going on as well. And so I think one of the first folks that I would encourage any student to reach out to as they're coming new to campus is one of our community assistants, like the 2 that we have being part of this communication this evening. We're going to work with our community assistant training, which starts very soon, to make sure that all of our CAs have good information about sort of the big picture philosophy behind how we're approaching living in community in a pandemic setting, but who will also have good links and connection points to the specific information that we know students will be asking. I think one of the things that is evolving right now is the fact that we know that we have that sort of August 19 date for when classes start. And so we know that there are still some of those pieces that will continue to evolve as we near that time. So, at no point in our pandemic response have we had all of the answers for all of the future. What we do have is a really strong commitment to making sure that we're responding well to the best information we have at the moment. And so the training that we'll provide our student staff will be about going to the best information we have at the moment and about being ready, able, and even eager to adapt that information and adapt those policies as we learn new things about the way that we're navigating as a university. And I think that's true of all the policies that people have asked about this evening, is that where we are right now probably isn't where we were 3 weeks ago and may not be where we're at 3 months from now. And so maybe back to one of those earliest questions in our conversation about how do we prepare as ourselves for this fall semester, I think one of the other ways to do that is to think about and be ready for the fact that things are going to evolve. And so working to be ready to learn and grow and adapt along with all of the rest of us at SDSU will be a mindset that I think is really, really important. So coming ready to say, okay, I know what things are happening now, and then I know how to learn and read my email and find the info about how things are going to be next week. And we'll get through that week, and then I'll learn how things will be the week after that. And to a small degree, that's the way we go through life. It's just, I think, that much more sort of relevant, and we're much more cognizant of it when what we're adapting to is a global pandemic. So I think that coming ready to change and adapt, and then knowing who those resources are. So your CA, your hall director, your academic advisor, your student group leader. A lot of our student groups are going to have student leadership who are really clued in to the way to do things on campus. And so finding that student organization that might be a good connection point, and then like tugging at the sleeve of that that leader in the student organization to say, hey, how would you advise me on this? All of those places will be really good resources, and all of them will continue to get good training and the best information that the university has at any given moment about where we're at.
Just as I'd hoped, our student hosts were phenomenal, and I wanted to just turn it back to them for one final thought or one final question for both of you. And you can maybe draw straws. Oh wait, no, you can't do that. Maybe you could do a rock, paper, scissors and see who goes next. I'm watching you, Hattie and Zeb. I'd really like to hear from... Okay, awesome. Yes, cool. Confetti drop. I would really like to hear from your perspective, some parting thoughts for this group, because you've been here already, you've learned and lived here with us as a student, and you probably have some great expertise that can be shared right now. And then you can turn it back to me. But rock, paper, scissors first. Ready, set,
Well,
go.
I actually just lost. Okay, let's try again. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Oh, I guess scissors does win on that one, Zeb, so you'll just have to have a really big finish. So thanks, Hattie.
All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer. And thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us, whether you're a concerned student or parent or member of our Jackrabbit community. We truly are here to support you. And this might be a unique year, but I really believe that together we will be able to do it. And as a student, I am super excited that as we come together on campus, we can welcome some of our newest members of the Jackrabbit family. And together when we're on campus, we're going to do what we can to keep each other safe, learn a lot, and get involved with all of the possibilities that we have here at State.
Kind of bouncing off of that, like Hattie said, we've got a great community of people here at State, whether that be those academic advisors that Toby talked about, Res Life staff, other students, and not to fret. Things will always go a little awry upon occasion, and we just have to get better with that. A personal note, I have forgotten a pillow each time I've come to campus. So that's another thing you just have to adapt to. You will not always remember everything, and things are going to change, but it'll be a blast to have you on campus, and we're so excited to see you soon.
That was great. I don't know if I could survive a day without a pillow, so you must be very resilient, Zeb. Thank you both so much, and thank you to the panelists who gave us a lot of their information from their respective areas. I do really want to encourage you to double check that chat space that we have. There's been a lot of questions coming in, and Sophia, you've done a beautiful job getting answers, and same with Nathaniel and Danny, and we appreciate that. Certainly, there are going to be some different links there that are going to be useful for you to check in later. And as we've said, things are potentially getting updated and changed, and so those correspondence pieces, I want to just echo that again. Please watch your JAX account. It will be a great source of information. And also, finally, one plug out for the next forum that is going to be coming up, which probably touches on some of the questions that have come up, and that is on student engagement. For those of you who haven't been part of our campus community yet, community engagement is about being connected and connecting meaningfully. And so you'll get to hear from some experts in that field and talk about ways that students will be able to connect, and kind of taking into what Becky and Toby's talked about, programming. Just what can students do when they get here, and what are some of the fun components outside of the classroom that can help people get together and build good relationships. So we really look forward to hopefully seeing many of you again, if not all. Invite friends that you know are coming to state so that we can all be a part of this experience the next time around. Thank you so much, and thank you panelists and hosts.